here we are. Ask Mike. We kind of jumped in and got rolling, and I think this is great stuff. Everybody,
Yeah.
look what the catcher again. It's our friend Tim Jones. He's back
Yeah.
again, and we've asked Tim specifically. We're going to be talking about um, technology in general, whether that's electronics on the marching field, things that we can use in the classroom. But as you say that, you use the term parabolic mic, Tim. I don't know what that means. Hopefully, you can give us a quick refresher on that. But where I'm going to go with this question is, even 10 years ago, as we would mic, you get so much because we live in a part of the world. I don't know where your part of the world is, but West Texas has a lot of wind. And you get so much wind noise going through a microphone, and or that the technology was kind of subject to the environment because we didn't think about it in those terms. So I hope some of what we can talk about today is best practices for miking things, best practices for actual what type of a mic, be that parabolic or, listen to me, I'm going to throw out terms that I know nothing about, cardioid or directional versus condenser, et cetera, et cetera. So is that kind of where we're headed, Mike? Is that what we want to kind of
Yeah.
dive into?
Because I've always leaned on the advice and knowledge of people that understand that world. I understand just enough of it. It's kind of like me trying to repair my pickup truck. I can open the hood and stare at it and go, everything looks okay. And that's
Yeah.
the extent of my knowledge in electronics.
And
I'm
I liken it
always,
to me
yeah,
speaking Spanish. I can know enough words that people go, he must know Spanish. No, he doesn't.
yeah. And with people, it's a whole burgeoning workforce now in marching band. I mean, people have their sound technicians. Our new little Skyrider Drum and Bugle Corps, we have a sound technician. That's their whole job, is just to do electronics and sound. But I always jokingly say that as a band director, I just wanted an on and off switch and a big knob that said louder and softer. And obviously that's never going to work, because it's too complicated a process. So we've got Tim here who spent most of his adult life trying to figure out what band directors want and trying to fulfill that need. So I guarantee he has some knowledge for us on what works best on the field and smaller setups, bigger setups. So we're just going to turn this man loose on us.
Sure, but let's reestablish the context of what we were talking about. We were talking about electronics on a marching field.
Yes.
What are the expectations or what are the best practices? And obviously, I think one way to fulfill that electronic requirement quickly is just to have soloists that have mics and or your pit.
Mm-hmm.
But those can probably compete. So I'm getting out of Tim's way, and you can jump back in now and tell me what a parabolic mic is and if it's good or bad, et cetera, blah, blah, blah.
It's not so much so I'm actually gonna change directions here because there's other things that have to be taken into consideration. You've got real world versus, what everybody wants it to be. Now, everybody actually wants it to be, like Mike said, a power button and a volume control. You can't really do that anymore, although I have directors that that's all they want. That's actually way harder to do because you're limited by what they're asking for. So if you, let me think about this. If you just give them that, then I don't know that it's doing you a whole lot of good having an electronic system on the field. You need to, if you're going to have electronics, you need to use it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about that, unfortunately, the budget has to come into play because there's so many budget things to, you know, you could spend. I have had bands spend 40, 50, $60,000 on sideline sound systems versus, you've got the band that says I have $2,000 to spend on a sideline sound system, and you know if it's a small school, they're not going to have unlimited funds to spend on something like that. So the first thing that you have to do is you have to realistically figure out how much money that you have to spend on this. Uh, Now, once you've got that figured out, then you kind of go, you kind of design it backwards. You want it to be right. you want to know what their goals are with the particular sound system, but you have to ask all of these questions before you can come up with the right solution. Uh, the most typical sound system, if you will, between and I'm talking about smaller bands right now, you're probably going to spend $5,000 to $10,000 minimum on a nice sound system where you can mic your percussion instruments and mic a soloist or mic a few soloists, something like that. And that even that sounds like a lot of money, but it's really not by the time you talk about how you're going to set up the speakers and the carts for the speakers and what microphones you're going to use. And then when we get into microphones, here again, it's more limited by budget and what you're trying to do. Now, as far as how to do something, uh, for instance, Corpse Design just came out with a new microphone holder that goes on all of their frames. It can also go on other people's frames. And Dennis showed it to me. We were there picking up some new carts the other day, and I think it's brilliant that they did this. And we're probably going to sell a ton of them because it makes it so easy to put a microphone mount on a frame. That's always been one of the things that you're trying to figure out. You want some type of a shock mount when you're talking about miking a marimba or a vibraphone or something like that. You don't want it hard mounted to where anything that hits the frame or if the frame moves, you don't want the microphone to sound. So we'll get into some of that. But I don't know. So Mike, where do you want me to start when you're talking about that? Because like I say, one of the questions that we always ask is, what kind of budget are we looking at?
Mhm.
And I know that's a bad question because people think, well, you're just trying to spend a lot of money. No, I'm really not. Uh, I'm trying to get what the director wants and or needs within their budget.
Right. But it's the same thing, good, better, best. If you're going all out and you've got the budget to get the absolute top of the line, awesome for you. That's one thing we can do. But it's not a wrong question to say, I need to figure out how to best utilize the funds that you have.
Mhm.
And so if you can tell me what that means, then I can go say, well, this is a good microphone. Here's a better microphone or for that application, or do we just need a good general mic? I think I do understand what Tim says when somebody says, well, how much money do you have? Oh, you're just trying to take all my money. No, I'm trying to build you the best system we can build or best use of the funds that you have available. So I think that's where
Yeah.
we're trying to launch this. It's not like you just get a microphone that goes through your Long Ranger anymore.
Yeah, and that's historically where it all started. I can remember the days when it started. We think of electronics with these big mega bands. It really started with little 1A bands, in my opinion, where we didn't have a tuba player. So we would use an electric bass or a keyboard synth or something, and we'd mic it through the Long Ranger, or the flute player player solo, and you just put the headset around her neck with the mic that you talked on during rehearsal. And we started with that and it grew. But to Tim's question, where I would love to have clarification, because I worked with over 30 bands this fall, and every one of them used electronics. So there was two main issues. One was, how do we mic our front ensemble to make it sound authentic, if that makes
Natural.
sense?
Yeah.
Natural. And how do we mic our soloist to make them sound authentic and natural? So first of all, the front ensemble, because that seems to be more of an issue. So what do you think, Tim? What are your things you tell directors when they're scared about this? Because
Well,
scared is the right word.
well, and you're correct. Scared is the right word. Another thing, and I'm going to answer that question, but another
Okay.
thing to consider is that this has to be run by a, a student.
Mhm.
I mean, when now I halftime at a football game, I don't think it's going to make any difference.
No.
But during contest, it has to be run by a student. So you have to have it all set up like it's supposed to be before you get to that point. Obviously, you want things done the right way, because so when you just plug a microphone into a mixer, the mixer that you're plugging into will determine how much control you have over the sound that's coming through there. So you got to obviously have a good quality microphone. So a lot of times we use like the AT 2035s or even the AT 2020s sometimes. Both of those microphones, the AT is the Audio Technica. There's lots of companies that make good microphones. Those are what I consider to be a medium priced. So let's just talk, middle of the road pricing.
Okay.
That's going to be a middle of the road price microphone that sounds great with that particular product. Then you're talking about microphone placement. Yep. So that's my phone. Sorry about that, y'all. Didn't think about that.
But just to clarify, I don't know what you're talking through right now, but that looks like what you're talking. A condenser mic, the AT 2020 and the AT 2035, they look like the mic that you're talking through right now.
They do. And this is a 2020. And the 2035 looks the same. I'm actually on my son's computer in his room using his setup. So, but yes, this is what that microphone, either one of those microphones look like. Now, this particular mount is not the mount that we would use for something like that. And the reason is because it's a hard mount. So what you would have is you would have a mount that mounts to your hard mount, but then this microphone slides in, and with Audio Technica, they have a shock mount.
Mhm.
So it's not rubber bands, but I'm going you to imagine rubber bands holding the microphone in place so that there's no vibrations coming off of, if I hit this desk or something or bump this, you're going to hear it. Those rubber bands, if you will stop that.
Yeah.
There's another way that people do it is I've seen guys get ping pong nets. Now there's actual nets that are made for that as well, but it's basically a ping pong net.
Mhm.
And they tie the net to the frame of the marimba or whatever it is that you're trying to do, and then they place those microphones. It's the same principle as the shock mount. I just prefer the shock mounts because it's a better quality mount, and I know that nothing is going to move.
Right. And I'm glad you brought that up, Tim, because that's probably the most common mistake I see. Because I'm not I'm not a high tech person, but I know just enough to know when it's wrong, because I'll go and I'll hear all these weird sounds coming from the front ensemble. So I'll crawl down out of the stadium steps and I'll go down there and look, and they'll have the input to the mic is zip tied directly to the frame of the marimba. And it's like, and bless their hearts. I mean, I wouldn't have known the difference, except that I've seen it done the other way. Man, I've seen those shock mounts where a mic will drop in the tunnel at state marching, and all of a sudden that's messed up, and they'll borrow one from another band or whatever. It's that important, band directors. You have to have those microphones where they don't pick up extraneous noise.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, like somebody referenced earlier, wind in West Texas is a common thing.
Mhm.
So you would like to have a windscreen on your microphone. I've even seen this and have helped a band do this, to where they've had material made to go completely around the frame of the marimba. So everything, and then they put their school logo on that material. And so it looks cool as far as what you're presenting to the public, but the whole purpose is it's basically just a big windscreen to stop wind from hitting underneath the marimba.
Yeah.
And so I've seen that used, and it's a great visual effect. So I mean, you can, whether it's your school logo or
Part of the show for that year.
part of the show, yeah, exactly. You can really make it. Uh, I do the school logo because you're not having to redo it every year, but
Yeah.
you can also just use plain black. You can attach these things with Velcro. It's really not a big deal. You get some people that know how to use a sewing machine, and it's done for next to nothing.
Yeah.
So I see people doing that, and I think that's a great idea to help stop that wind noise. Uh, but as long as you can get that done, then when you're talking about how to make it sound realistic, now
Mhm.
I do sound in churches. I do sound everywhere, live concerts, whatever it might be. And if I've got time, if it's not one of those situations to where I'm just walking in and having to just start mixing, if you do it right, you want to EQ each microphone individually for what you're trying to do. So your EQ is going to be different on the low side of a marimba than it is on the high side of the marimba. Because you're what you're trying to do, and what you referred to, Mike, was you want it to sound realistic.
Mhm.
So one of the ways to do that is to obviously listen to the sound of the marimba unamplified, and then turn on the speakers and listen to it amplified, and then make sure that your microphone is not changing that sound, because I can make any of that stuff sound kind of any way I want to. I can add lows, I can make it more tinny. What you really want is, if you think you've got a good sounding marimba, that's what you want it to sound like, is
Yeah.
your marimba.
Well, I'm glad you said it that way, Tim, because I've gotten into listening, because I can't really participate in it, listening to these high tech discussions between sound engineers with a marching band and their head director on the frequency levels and the cutting out these frequencies and doing all that. And I'm sure that's very intelligent. But I like what you're saying. Have the kid play the marimba. Now turn on the mixing board and the amp, and then change the EQ with your ear, and don't worry about 1200 megawatts, or whatever, and just make it sound like a marimba. How simple can that be? So they get so caught up in it. So I just want to throw that out there. So directors, you don't have to be a super level, high level thinking sound engineer. Just use your ears like you've used your whole life when you play your horn. Okay.
Sure. And Tim, I'm going to say this, and then you can say it the right way. The truth is, once you start doing that with your ear, you start noticing certain frequencies every time you need to do this or do that to create, whether it's the low end, the mids, the highs. After a while, those frequencies, you go, I already know that I'm going to have to do this, this, and this to create my bass. Agree, Tim?
All right, say it again. Sorry. I'm 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 trying to do an
This is a
emergency
perfect
deal.
example of our work relationship.
Listen, I'm trying to answer an emergency question.
Derek,
So
blah, blah, blah. What? I said that when you start EQing, even if you don't know what frequencies do what, as you start to EQ, you start to recognize a consistency of, if I'm doing the lowest side of the marimba, I'm going to have to notch this out or twist that or do that. There is kind of a base pattern that becomes a standard for what you're doing. It doesn't take an hour every time you do it once you've done it enough.
that's correct. This is me talking. I think I have a pretty good ear. Um, and the deal is that
He
anybody
obviously
that's
tunes out my frequency,
yes,
but
yes.
he's got a good ear.
We call it a
Any-
bypass filter.
Anybody that does what we do, in theory, should have a pretty good ear. I mean, you know if your kids are playing in tune or not,
Mhm.
or if you don't, you should know if they're
Or
playing
just
in tune or
balancing
not.
your band.
Yeah,
Balance your band, yeah.
or how to do the pyramid, whatever. When I'm actually doing sound training classes, I tell people they need to listen to classical music like a symphony
Yes.
because most of the time those are balanced, and I'm not talking to, you know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about balance. Most of the time those are balanced like they should be. Of course, those are all professional players that have been playing for a long time, and you kind of know what you're getting. But if you're just training your ear on how to listen or how to balance stuff like that, then that's a great place to start. And then once you understand the quote pyramid of sound, it's super easy. You're just relating, then you just relate that to marching band or your pit instruments, or even a marimba that is going to have, that's a, let's say it's a big marimba, and you're going to use two microphones to mic that particular marimba. You know, when you get an instrument that is really long, you're going to typically use two microphones, and then you're going to control your highs differently than your lows, and you're going to EQ them differently as well. But listen, I'm not a guy. People start talking. You were talking about professional sound people. Most schools don't have that. So when we get into, well, I've got to have compression and I, I actually don't like that. Not enough people understand that, in my opinion, to know what they're doing and to set it properly.
Mhm.
Now,
You are correct.
can we do it? Absolutely, we can do it. If the director says, "Hey, this is what I want," but if you set the gain correctly and you have the proper wind screens and or things around to make sure you're not picking up a bunch of wind noise, then it's not hard to not have to worry about compression and things of that nature. You can you can just use, and the cleaner the microphone, the typically the better the sound. You're not doing anything to the sound. You're getting the true sound without doing any other stuff to it except for re-EQing the microphone.
Right. Nothing's more distracting to me than gate noise on compression and limiting.
Well, and yeah, gates are a problem. You hear it all the time, when somebody's talking on the phone or they're on. I talked to my son. He's both of my sons actually have motorcycles, and they have these fancy helmets that you can talk, but they all have noise gates. And so the first part of the word when they start a sentence cuts out because the gate has not opened yet to allow that sentence to go through. It drives me crazy.
Yeah. And where we run into problems with band directors is exactly what you gentlemen are saying. They will have a system designed for them, and then they'll have their little iPad, and they'll be doing all their bypass filters and their EQing and their compression and all that. And they're in over their head. You know what I
Most of the
mean?
time.
And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, everything, nothing sounds right. And then they're frustrated. Then they call the tech and they call the music store, they call whoever, and then it's not working. And man, I really like what you said about just listening to a good symphony orchestra and kind of cleanse your ear palate, where you know what you're listening for. And then just go with your gut instinct on that. And I like the idea of, keep it simple, as simple as you can do it, keep it simple. If you get into all of that, it's quite the thing. And the other thing I want to throw in with that, please, band directors out there that are lucky enough to have a staff, don't throw all of this on your percussion person. I'll just leave it at that. Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
now I feel bad because one of the things I was going to say is I think a mistake a lot of people make is that when they hear the word tech, they kind of eliminate the musical side of what they're doing. If you
Right.
don't have a musician mixing, you are already creating problems.
Yeah.
The person running the system, at least setting it up, needs to be a good musician.
Mhm.
that is actually, in my opinion, a musical instrument, the mixing board.
I agree with that. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna say something else real quick. Obviously, you have analog mixers, and analog mixers is what everybody has used for, you know, 30 years, whatever it's been. Longer than that. Analog's been around a lot longer than that. But I'm talking about on the sidelines.
Yeah.
Nowadays, people are using more of digital mixers. Don't get a digital mixer that only uses an iPad. If it does not have some type of a screen where you can make adjustments on the spot on the actual mixer itself, you don't have to have all the knobs and stuff, but you can have a screen. Don't just use one that you're just asking for trouble.
Yes.
You need to trust me on this. If you've Now, I don't care that you use an iPad all of the time to do it, because nearly all of those are capable of being run off of an iPad as well. Just don't let it be the iPad that you have to have in order to run the sound system, because as soon as you have a problem, you can have a problem with the iPad. Uh, you can you've got to have it to where you can make adjustments on the mixer itself.
Without
So,
the iPad. Yeah.
yeah, without the iPad. Now, we use a bunch of uh, we use a bunch of Yamaha mixers. I prefer the Yamaha like TF mixers. You can do a Yamaha TF rack. You can do a Yamaha TF1, and all of this. They've got a TF3 and a TF5. It's a good mixer. It depends on how many channels you want to be on your input. And you can control everything that you want to control. It's going to have way more capability than you're ever going to use, and they're still not super expensive. But that's and learning to use that, or at least learning to use the basics. The other thing that something like that has is it has a feature that once you get it set, and that's assuming that somebody like that knows what they're doing, myself or a real tech that knows what they're doing. Once that's set, you can lock a screen. So even if somebody comes in and does a bunch of changes, you can always press one button and go back to where you were, where you knew that you liked it before somebody, whether it's a kid or an adult that thinks they know what they're doing, went in and made a bunch of changes.
Yeah. And I tell you what, with our directors and the kids that run them, it's kind of a vicious cycle. But you want a really good musician to run your board, and during the show, only students can run the electronics. Now there is a little bit of a rule in there that if there's a catastrophic failure, that the director and adult can step in and do something. There's also with iPads. I saw it at state marching. There's lots of schools that are cheating, and their staff member will sit up in the stands with an iPad and run the mixing board, which is illegal as all get out, but no one seems to care. But you get that student running the board. But I love the thing with the scenes, because you don't always get your best musician in the band to do that, because you kind of want them to be playing their horn, correct? So what they do is they'll lay out the music. Let's say it's a clarinet player who's a halfway decent player, but they're going to run electronics because they broke their leg in cross country, so they can't march. So you put them up there and they just put their music in front of them and has it done as scenes when it gets to that part in the show. So they just know to put in 53, or they just know to do whatever. That's the epitome of what they do. They're not there to EQ anything. Everything should have been EQ'd from the front. But please, directors, don't trust and don't expect a student to be able to do all of this just because they sprained their ankle in football workout. So you just move this and make it sound good. So I say that because I've seen that happen. Okay.
Well, Mike, I'm going to throw this back at you too, though. I'm trying to remember if it was area. There was a group that we had feedback almost the entire 8 minutes they were on the field.
Yeah.
And I kept saying, somebody do something. But I think the students are like, I don't know what to do. So my point being,
Neither
and
did
Tim,
the
you can
staff. The staff was sitting there, and the band you're talking about, yeah, they ended up advancing to the state marching contest. But that was bad. I think what happened. This is just my opinion as a sound technician, Mike Lenny, is they were running the music through the concourse underneath the bleachers, and it was picking up through the system. So you literally through the whole show you had this.
Right.
Not even a squeal, just an actual pitch.
But is
the
that a
whole time.
catastrophic event? Can the director step up?
Yes.
Okay.
They should have, but they didn't because they were afraid. They didn't realize that at the time. But I was doing tabulations. You were announcing, and I was doing tabs for that
Right.
scorekeeping. I almost ran down the bleachers and unplugged it myself.
Well,
Because
so
I
I'm gonna-
know that group so well. I almost ran down there and said, just unplug everything. Said I would rather have no electronics than that. Now the kids did fine, and
Sure.
but here's the kicker, though, gentlemen. In UIL, there was a time period when electronics were new and fresh, and if it went wrong in a performance, you didn't make a big deal about it.
Right.
It's like, well, the mic didn't work on the solo. There's a big push right now, and I think rightfully so, to tell you the truth. If you're going to put electronics on the field, it better dadgum work.
And so I'm going back to Tim with this because we're talking about who's running it.
Yeah. If
Do
it doesn't
do we
work,
need-
they're going to get points off now, where they used
we
to
need to
not.
need to design a system that a student can run, and then take the time to not only teach the director or the sound tech or whoever they've got. I know there's lots of groups that have one guy that's all they do for them is design sound, but there has to be training. Would you agree, Tim, for this particular mic, all the different applications that it's going to be used for, so nobody sits and listens to 8 minutes of feedback because they're freaked out and don't know what to do?
Yeah. I mean, training is training for this is no different than practicing for your show or
Learning
your
the drill,
contest.
right.
Yeah. I mean, the deal is if you're not practicing mixing the sound, and like you say, I think that the sound should already be mixed. If you're not going to do scenes, Mike, I'll tell you this:
Okay.
a lot of people don't have the capability of doing scenes or understand scenes. That's still over their head, even though their equipment is capable of doing it. Turning microphones on and off at the right time.
Yes.
I mean, literally. So the mixing should be done, like we said, but turning off the solo mic after the solo and
Mhm.
turning it on, right before the solo. You don't want that microphone live during the rest of the show.
Right.
It's gonna sound weird. Things are gonna sound distant. That's not going to help the sound of the band. People might think that it's going to, but unless you're doing something on purpose to try to do that, it's just going to sound weird. Because as somebody goes in front of it or even close to it, that's what you're going to hear, and it's going to throw off the mix, the blend of the band, because
Oh,
then
yeah.
you're using electronics, and you don't even want to hear that coming
And then
through.
also
through
you're dealing with a
electronics.
phasing issue at that point, because if your trumpet soloist leaves their mic on, then they go on the field. Now they're on the middle of the soccer circle. Then their sound's coming immediately out of the speaker.
Right.
Yeah, so it's just a mess. One other thing with electronics I'd throw out there, and we did it because people much smarter than I told me to do it. Said plan on producing catastrophic failures during your rehearsal, so the kids know. So the sound people who are running, they know that we're going to shut down all electronics in the middle of the second piece, as if the power went out. And so to see how the band reacts, don't tell the band you're doing it, and then make sure none of the solo mics work on this run. Every solo mic should be incorrectly done on this run, just to see how the soloist react to it. And then you have a discussion, you have training, you sit there with the whole band and say, now this could happen. Our frequency we use for our wireless mic might be all of a sudden the same as the stadium.
Yeah,
Now
and
we're
I
in
will-
trouble,
I will say this, and there's ways to prevent that, but that's equipment that costs a lot of money. I mean, I can scan for frequencies now.
Yeah,
Typically, that's not something that you want a band to invest in.
right.
They don't need that kind of equipment. Now, I do suggest a lot of times that you call the stadium ahead of time. If it's a football game, I'm not frankly that worried about it. But if you're going to uh, Ratliff Stadium, or you're going to go to the stadium in Andrews, or the Shotwell in Abilene, or any of these stadiums that host contests all the time, it's not a bad idea to find out what frequencies are going on around that area, because it's not just so wireless systems. It could be a different TV station that's broadcasting somewhere, and there is a list, and maybe we can actually, I think it would be a great idea to post this. There are different uh, TV stations that you don't want your frequencies to be on if you're going to travel to that area, because even as high tech as these things are, they can still get interference from the digital TV stations. It might not be, Fox, but it might be one of the Fox, out here it's like 24.1 is Fox. And then there's a 24.2 and a 24.3 and a 24.4. It might be one of those other frequencies that's messing with, or could mess with, your frequencies that you're marching with. So there's a list that's published for every area. It's done by the government for what all the frequencies are in a certain area. That are I'm talking about everyday frequencies, like the TV stations, the DTV stations, the digital TV stations. You'll probably want to look at that before you're traveling to a contest in a different city or location, and you come up with exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I did not realize those were actually published. That's cool. I know that we've reached another evolution, is that when you get your entry stuff packet, tells you where to park your buses and whatever, they will tell you the frequencies of the stadium so that you can make room for that. A personal story, kind of embarrassing, but personal story. We used those old long rangers at Wiley High School. And then they told us, well, you can't use them anymore because they did those certain band frequencies are now emergency vehicles. And, Mike Lunny just thought, well, it's just the stadium at Wiley, So I'm sitting there using them during rehearsal or whatever. And all of a sudden a band parent who's a fireman came on and he goes, Mr. Lunny, and it came through the speaker, of course, to the whole band. Mr. Lunny, I can hear your voice. Do you realize it's illegal to use this frequency? And so I go, yes, I'm shutting it down right now. Thank you, sir. And we took those and we just used them for like metronomes, you know what I mean, kind of thing. But yeah, it's real tricky. It's real tricky, but I like that. I did not know that was like published information. That I know, like at Abilene ISD, the airport's right next door, so you're not going to get on the air traffic controller frequencies, but you will mistakenly find the security guys that run the fence perimeter with their walkie-talkies. You will find those frequencies, and bands will go, oh my gosh, there's someone on a walkie-talkie speaking on my frequency. So it's boy, it gets complicated quick, doesn't it, gentlemen?
It does get complicated quick, and it's preventable.
Yeah.
So we need to do everything but that's all in the prep work. That's not something that you're trying to fix the day of the event.
Right.
You better have that done long before. And I think that's something that you ought to look at, at the beginning of the season. You're going to be traveling to these places. So let's just go ahead and look at what we need to look at in case we need to change our frequencies. Because here again, you're training that kid or whoever it is that's running that system to make sure that that is done, and make sure that the frequencies get changed. And you got to train more than one person.
Mm-hmm.
I have been in situations to where I've been invited and I've gone to do it for them. I went out to El Paso because last minute their normal tech got sick. Well, you better have more than one person.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went and did it. And I will tell you that it was one of those weird emergency situations. It was super hot. The sun was affecting what you could read on the screen, and their whole system shut down right before they started to play. So their warm up clock was already going, and their entire system shut down.
Ooh.
So I had to get the whole thing rebooted, which we did. I had like 10, 15 seconds left by the time it was done. But
Right on time.
you want to talk about
Just the way you
not a
scripted it.
yeah, not a happy camper. I was not a happy camper. I did not want to tell the director, that I, of all people, could not get this back online. But we did, and it went great, and they advanced. So
Yeah, that's something.
Well, let me kind of jump in here real quick. I love this kind of conversation because I don't know anything about it, and it fascinates me, and it's fun to listen to. I do think we need to plan on doing some more conversation on this topic because I still want to. I mean, besides marching, there's lots of applications we need to talk about technology for band programs, whether that's teaching aids in the actual band hall during concert season, et cetera, et cetera. But Tim, would you do me a favor? I want to kind of jump. Sounds like I'm going all the way back to the beginning because I kind of am. If I'm just realizing that I need to get involved in at whatever level my program is there this is the first thing I would do that will make your band sound better as opposed to all the bright shiny toys because somebody else has them? What's the first aspect of electronics that I want to look at for my band program? And we're talking about marching, so I'll just leave it there. As opposed to I need to spend $50,000 if I don't really need to spend $50,000 yet. What's my first getting my feet wet with electronics? What do I want to look at doing first?
well,
And I know that's kind of broad and vague, but
it's not, because I've enjoyed this, and we've had a great conversation, but we haven't gone into super specifics. I mean, we've talked about how to do some things, but the first thing that every director has to figure out is, what do I want to do with the electronics? Okay, that's literally the first thing that has to happen, is because each director is different. And I have directors come in, directors move frequently. Let's just say that, or a lot of directors move frequently. And when that happens, the next director that's coming in will go, "Well, I hate this setup. It's a terrible setup. I want to do this and this and this and this." Obviously, there's a lot of grace when somebody is new. Usually, a lot of times the administration is willing to spend money when there's a new director that comes in. So I mean, it doesn't matter how long you've been there. You've got to figure out what you want to do. So if you've got 3 marimbas and a vibe, and let's just even say some chimes. I don't. I have mic'd chimes before. I don't think it's really that necessary, but I have done it at the request of the director. They've got to figure out what they want to mic, and then in the same time, it's okay. Are we going to have any soloists? And we talk about, if we're going to have soloists or a small ensemble, how do we want to look at miking them? Because frankly, wireless microphones are great, but anything that is wireless is more susceptible to a problem.
Amen.
Just like the frequency thing. So there are times where, I mean, I completely get it. They want the kid out in the middle of the field on the 50-yard line. Obviously, they don't want to run a microphone out there to him that has a wire attached to it. But if in the show design, you can figure out how to get your soloists to the sideline somehow, or close to the sideline, to where you could run a wired microphone out to them, it is going to cut down on a lot of headache later on.
Yes.
So they need to think about that when they're thinking about who they want to mic. Once we have that information, because obviously a wired microphone is also way less expensive than a wireless microphone is. So once we figure out exactly what they're trying to do for that particular show, or however they're wanting to use that sound system. Then we start down the road of, okay, so if you want to mic these marimbas and the vibe, this is how many microphones you're going to have. And it starts with your music store, and you need to make sure that your music store knows what they're doing when they're talking about this. Not just I have a lot of music stores that actually call me about how to do some of this stuff because they don't know how to do this stuff. I think that that's something that a music store ought to know how to do, but you would be amazed. I get calls from all over the country. So how do we do this? What's the best way to do this? So I do the same thing with them. I tell them, you got to tell me what the setup is. What are the goals? Once you tell me the goals, then I can tell you what you need. And then we just go from there. Now I'm going to start with like an AT2035 for however many of those they need. I would prefer to use wired microphones if at all possible. And then we're going based off of what equipment do you already have? We're going to ask, what equipment do you already have in the program? Because if they've already got good speakers, I'm not trying to get them to spend more money on different speakers. If they've already got something that's viable for what they're trying to do, most of them are not going to have the right kind of mixer, but we're going to talk about the mixer. But that's also where we start talking about budget. You know, you can buy a small mixer for a small band and an analog mixer that starts at a couple $100, and you know you could get a pretty large one for $600 or $700, as compared to a digital mixer, which I would prefer them to have. But the digital mixer is going to be, you know, probably 1700 up to 2500, and then obviously they go bigger than that. But in that price range, well, if their budget's $2,000 or $3,000, obviously that's not going to work. So
I guess one of the questions I have here is, as we do this, I think we encourage people to think long or big picture, have long range vision in this, and not just get something that gets you by this year, because when you decide to get bigger, then it doesn't work and you have to buy another round of equipment, as opposed to, like you say, the TF series Yamahas. You can buy one of those, and even if you get just a smaller one, it's expandable at some point, but you could use that in multiple applications. Even if you're just trying to mic a soloist, if you get the right equipment to start with, to project, to amplify that, when you decide to do the pit, or vice versa, you've got what you need. You just have to add on to that, as opposed to looking at a completely different system.
yeah, and we want to use add-on stuff. We do not want to change. We don't want to have to change the main controls, if you will, which is going to be your mixer, and however, if you're going to use powered speakers or if you're going to use an amplifier and you're going to use passive speakers, however we want to set it up. Some people even use a single speaker on the cart, which is fine. Part of it depends on the size of the band and what kind of coverage you're trying to create. But we have to take all of those things into consideration, and we help with that. So even if some of our road people are out talking to a band director and they don't happen to know the answer to that, they pick up the phone and call me and say, "Hey, what do we need to do here? This is the situation." And I go through these same questions. It doesn't matter. So if there's a director out there that needs help and they don't feel like they can get help from their music store, and I'm not promote, but call me. Listen, I'm happy to help people. I want it to be right. Doesn't mean that you buy the stuff from us. It means that I'm happy to help you get through that thought process. So hopefully you don't forget anything. And then we work on how to get it, what it's going to cost, so you have an idea. I'm not slamming buying that stuff online, okay? But there's a lot of times, and Mike, you can speak to this because you would know better than me. There's a lot of people that'll just go on and they'll see a pre-made sound system and they're like, "Hey, that's what we need." And they'll just go in and buy that pre-made sound system and they don't have a clue what they're doing.
Yeah. And whatever you buy, you've got to have some sort of support for it. I mean, yeah, I see that as one of the major problems because this in the podcast is kind of like I just kind of tell you what the problems are and y'all have the solutions to it, but that's a big problem. They'll just go, "Hey, we can save this much money or do this, we can buy this all one unit." And then they're sitting up there in the stands and I'm working the band and they can't take time to listen to what's going on. They can't teach the band. They're up to their neck trying to figure out the electronics. And you just have to have some sort of support in that.
Right.
So you're right. You need someone you can call. And if you wholesale it, that's what I like to call it. If you wholesale buy things, great. You save some money. Money's important, obviously. But if you don't have any support for it, it's a worthless system.
Well, and that's true. And I am going to say this. A lot of times people just think they're saving money. They're actually not saving any money. If you get with main music companies, and I'm trying to
trying to be
I'm trying to be nice.
Yes, I understand.
If you're with if you're going through Intune Music or even some of our competitors that are close, they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get any support because all of these, a bunch of guys and gals just call me. I mean, you would be surprised at how many phone calls that I'll get on a Friday. "Hey, this happened. I don't know what to do. What do I need to do?" And
Yeah.
obviously I'm there to help them. I'm either driving to their location or I'm FaceTiming them. Most of the time, frankly, I can FaceTime them and just solve the problem within 5 minutes because some kid has gone in and pushed something that
Yeah.
shouldn't be pushed.
Yeah, but I'm going to say this too. Whoever that local company is, if they know what they're doing, I can speak from ours. That's our mission, is to make your life easier. That's what we do. We're not going to say something and say, "Okay, see you, bye." We're invested in the success of what you do. So I think that is worth something in and of itself. Um, I'm going to ask one more thing and then I'm going to say, let's do some more conversation later. But I'm going to ask both of you. So each of you take a chance to answer this. Buy as much as you can afford, even if it's more than what you need right now. Yes or no?
I say yes.
I do too, because you
will
don't
need
know.
it.
Yeah, you will need it, and you're not going to know what's going to be allowed later on. And I'm going to throw this in there. Once other people in the school figure out that you have a nice sound system,
I know where this is going.
well, I'm absolutely, I see it all the time. Other groups, including administrators, want to use that sound system for different things in different places.
Mm-hmm.
And I've even had, people call and say, "Well, our stadium got hit by lightning, so we don't have a sound system in the stadium." And my first response is, "Well, the band is going to set up their sound system. Use it. All you have to do is run one announcer's mic.
Yeah.
One announcer's mic down to the band sound system, put it on the sidelines, and use it for your home crowd. Problem solved." That's the fastest, easiest way to do it. When a director approaches administration like that about the possibility of using it for other things, directors don't like it when it gets used for other things, but administration is a lot more willing to.
Seems like a better investment.
Yeah, it's a better investment to do that if they can use it for more things. So
yeah,
that's my thought.
But kind of my point on that was, don't say, "Hey, listen, this is all I need right now." Well, you really should think, no, this is what I got to do for this year. But you kind of tie your hands moving forward because you might not need that direct application next year, but you need something else if you would have listened and gotten as much, gotten a more as much as you could afford, you'd be in a better position when you want to do something different.
Yeah, what I tell
Or
directors is it's like buying clothes or shoes for your 8-year-old son. You know, you always buy the shoes a little bigger, and you always buy the clothes a little bigger,
so they can
'cause you
grow
want
into them,
so they
right?
can grow into them. So you want to buy your sound system where you can grow into it, if at all possible. And another caveat to kind of quiet part out loud: use the technique that Tim just told us about. Go to them, say this can be used as emergency sound system, etc. But then on the side, what we did is we bought a little through Caldwell at the time. We bought a little Yamaha one with the mixing board in the back of one of the speakers.
Powered speaker, yeah.
Powered speakers, and we used that. It had some stands and some mics and whatever. We put it all in a big anvil case, and when someone came to use our sound system, we rolled that little unit out. And the $30,000 setup never left the band hall. They didn't know they were stupid. They didn't know any better because it did the PTA meeting. You know what I mean? So they were like, "Hey, this is great. This is easy." I said, "Yeah, just plug in the mics here and just set this up. Here's a Shure mic and whatever." And they said, "Oh man, the band is so helpful." You know, that worked for the basketball game because the soundboard went down. So there's ways to manipulate it. You don't have to give them your $30,000 sound system with your wireless mics to use for a track meet. You know, you can find some other ways, but that's that part. Please do not play that portion for any administrators, especially ones I worked for, because I still see them at restaurants here in town.
And I would say this too, and I really am trying to. We need to do some more conversation. This needs to be another episode following this.
I think we've only hit about 10% of what needs to happen. And great information, Tim. Great information.
But Mr. Jones, yes or no? Part of when we're talking about where you get the sound system from, and Mike, I would say this to recommend to you as well as you talk to people. If training isn't part of what you're buying, there's probably something wrong there. In other words, anytime I know that Tim or his crew put together a package, part of that package is we're going to teach you how to use it, at least initially. Agreed?
Absolutely. Very, very seldom, and I mean very seldom, does somebody not want to get trained on it. I mean, I've had it happen, but 99.5% of the time, somebody needs some type of training on the system so they know what they're doing, because there's always something that they might not know. And technology is changing every day. So these things are getting more and more features. It's just like a computer. You know, technology is changing all the time. So Windows went through a big update right before I got on. I was like, yeah, I really didn't want that update right now, but but everything seems to have worked okay. So not a big deal.
But let me ask you, I'm going to say this, even if it's from the standpoint, and maybe I'm outdated on my technology now, if it has to be turned on in a certain order, if there's a relay that has to go on, or that's good stuff to know before you pop fuses and mess your system up before you even use it.
And you absolutely want to turn things on in order, but that's also that's a sequencer. And so what happens is if we're designing the system and it works in the budget, you want to use a sequencer. So here again, you're using one switch, and then it automatically comes on in order, and it automatically shuts off in order to protect all of the equipment. What you're trying to do there is you're trying to protect your speakers from popping.
You're saying what people will recognize us talking about is when all of a sudden you hear a pow real loud when you turn your system on.
Exactly. And that's not a good thing. That's bad for your speakers when that happens. And it's easily preventable. So
it's one of those universal noises that anybody that hears it automatically knows, that's not good.
Yeah, well, it doesn't sound good, and it's usually not. So,
all right, brother. Well, I think that Mike got glitched out of the technical conversation.
I saw that. I saw that.
So let's if you're good with it, let's plan on another one soon that we can do some follow up with this, and maybe we'll get some questions between now and then. I think Rick will put it on the screen. If you got a question about sound systems, ask Mike at intunemusic.com. Please send us an email. We'd love to get feedback from you and or questions that Tim could respond to and answer. But in the meantime, we don't say it enough, Tim, but we appreciate you and how much you help us with the Ask Mike. We think this is a good thing, and we appreciate you thinking that as well. So you have an awesome day. I'll try to have an awesome day, and we'll all talk again soon.
All right. Sounds great. Appreciate it.